since the boom's being finished, might as well do the boom crutch, the boom gallows. Pretty bad shape. This old leather padding is like rock. I've already cut out some sections here. Here's my technique for getting what's left off. I just grabbed a little bit. Well, first of all, I cut out the main piece of the leather, and it's really rock hard. It was not easy to cut. So when you get a little thin strip of the nailed section up, just grab it with a pair of pliers, tap it along with a hammer. Well, sometimes that happens too. Let's try this again. Now you turn the camera on and nothing works. There, another way to do it. After I removed the last of the leather, I painstakingly removed the old copper nails. After that, I sanded the wood down to a nice smooth finish and applied about 6 coats of varnish. That's what you're seeing here. So the next step is to put leather into the pockets on the boom gallows. And when you get raw leather wet, it's highly formable, but you need some help. So I cut a little wooden plug. There's some gaps here because you got to account for the leather thickness itself. Plus, you don't want to overly press it. You just want to get it in the ballpark, and then you can form it by hand and so on. And you can get the leather wet again and keep reforming it. So luckily, if I turn this around the other way, it'll work fairly well for this one. And then we'll save this one for last. It's a little bit snug in here, so we'll sand this mandrel, so to speak, down and make it fit a little bit better for this one. And we should be well on our way to finishing the boom gallows. So when I refinished the boom gallows, it was kind of a yellow pine looking color, and I had some rifle stock stain and used that. And it's a pretty good match. Now it's time to put the leather coverings on and see what it looks like. So we've cut out a piece of marine grade oiled leather, and we're gonna soak it in warm water for a while. I ordered a 2 square foot piece from M&B Ship Canvas Company. I bought this online. Came, as you saw earlier, expertly packaged, and it's really good quality stuff. It's 5.5 ounce, and Sunrise is the color. Got this idea from SV Ramblon, and I'll put a link to the video he made in the comments below. He did a great job. So the cuts in this gallows were so deep, I wasn't able to fully form the leather around. You can stretch leather quite a bit, but you can't make it get smaller. So I had to go with small slits, and I folded the flap over. And then instead of the traditional brass nails, I chose stainless steel screws with ring washers. Sometimes they're called decorative washers, or cup washers. They've got lots of names, but I kind of like the look of it. This Gallows isn't freestanding, so it'll be on a stainless steel bar that runs underneath. So I think the stainless steel here rather than copper will end up looking pretty good. We'll see. So we've got two of the leather covers in place. And it's time to do the third. So I started off with the center opening because it was the largest, and so I could take my plug and reuse it as I went to the smaller ones. And I just got done shaving it down for this third one here. So let's get started. You can make a template for your leather piece with a piece of paper, and once you get it sized, basically in my case, it's got to cover all of these old nail holes from previous attempts to refinish this thing. I like to round my corners. You can just use any round object that's handy. I used the top of a bottle of vitamins just to scroll my corners, and it came out pretty good. Next, put your leather in water. Just going to use a kitchen knife to weigh it down here. And let that soak 5 or 10 minutes. You want to completely soak through. So the leather is completely wet. You can tell because it's completely dark on both sides. So now we're going to figure out where it needs to go. I'll get it centered. That looks like the right spot. Now we're going to take our plug, and it should fit snug but not overly tight. Oh, it's not centered. It's going to put some marks on the leather, but you don't have to worry about that because you can get those to come back out with just moistening. So now we just start working the leather with our hands. Going to clamp in the plug. Just snug. Now we'll just start with one side here. And just, this is the fun part, over and over and over until it starts to behave itself. And once we get it in pretty flat, we'll go ahead and clamp a board down and let it dry that way. I found you can only get it to do so much in a single setting, and then let it dry, re-soak it, and start working again. So it's starting to look pretty good, so we'll go ahead and let that rest a bit and work on this side. As you work the leather like this, one thing you're doing is you're kind of forcing the moisture out of it. So one thing that's handy to have when you're working leather like this is just a sponge. When it starts to get dry, Just re-moisten it. Get it on both sides, and it'll definitely help you along. So I was able to get this side down nice and flat, and this side is looking pretty good now too. So then I like to put a piece of wood right on that corner and clamp it up good and snug, not super tight, just snug. And now I'll go ahead and let that dry almost completely, and then move to the other side. Just a quick shot to show that we're not clamping on the other side on the leather. So what we'll do is when this dries, it'll be nice and flat, and we'll be able to put a single board on this side, and then we'll work this side down and put a board on this side, and that way the clamps can oppose each other. Okay, so this side's been drying all night. Let's take a look. Wow, that looks really good. These corners are good. Now we need to do the same here, and we'll be ready to trim here to get this to lay flat, and we'll button it all up. So I've re-moistened just the hat that we want to work on. You can see the moisture line there. Put our plug back in. Trying to make sure our good side is properly positioned. Oops. Got our plug back in place. Again, you just keep working it and working it until you achieve the intended results. Now we'll clamp a board on to flatten it. So what I like to do is use the natural friction from the board and just work it over till everything's covered. Snug for the moment. It looks pretty flat down in there. Let that sit a few minutes. So now we'll add a board to the other side, which is already pretty much done, but we don't want to clamp onto that finished leather because we'll bruise it a bit. Nice and snug. And we'll let this dry for the rest of the day and see what it looks like. So let's take a look and see what we have. Been drying overnight. Looks good. I think we're ready for the final step. So we have to deal with this excess of leather here, so we're going to make a cut from about here to about a 1/4 inch from that point. I'll do this one first.
and we'll shape these so they're nice and round, but basically we'll have this come down like that and put a fastener right there. Again, I'll trim this corner so it's round. Actually, we'll just take this out. There you go. There, just right. And these markings here with the additional moistening of the leather, they'll smooth back out and look just like this, so we don't have to worry about these right now. So now it's time to add the fasteners. Use our leather punch. So I want to work these corners in so everything lines up. Got a little bit of excess leather here. These little cutting imperfections, you can take a nail file and smooth those out. So a nice smooth cut that way. Got a little roughness there still. Fastener about right there. Mark our lower piece. Looks good. Mark our pilot hole. And what I'll do when I'm done is put a clamp right on these tufts here and just put a tiny little bit of pressure and let that sit overnight. We'll moisten these up a little bit and that'll flatten them down a bit and it won't bruise the leather that way. So we'll just continue on and do the rest. There we go, one side done. Round drill. We'll moisten these up again so we can work them down a little bit flatter. Again, we just put these on pretty gently. We want to flatten but not bruise. Just snug. And we'll let those sit for a good hour or so, maybe longer. Here are the fasteners that I used. The leather vendor I used was M&B Ship Canvas, and when I inquired about the recommended treatment, they said to use a mix of beeswax and petroleum jelly. The recommended ratio is 8 parts to 1. So this would mean this is 3 3/4, and about 3/4 of an ounce is missing. So if this was 4 ounces, we would use half of this bar. So I think we're going to use about that much. Give that a try. So right about here. So microwaving didn't work, so I don't have a double broiler, so I put the Vaseline jar in a vegetable strainer, and it's been on a simmer for about, I don't know, 10 minutes now. The petroleum jelly is long since clarified, but you can see the piece of wax is still not cooperating. I'll let it go for a while and see what happens. Well, the wax is finally gone. It took about 20 minutes in this setup. So I've taken the screws out on this side, and you can see the mixture is just starting to gel. So before it does that, tested the temperature. It's not too hot to do by hand. So that's what I'm gonna do. Get under the flap here. Brand new leather, so it's not going to soak up a lot, but you want it warm so it will soak in. And after this sets up, we'll wipe off the excess. That'll do that side. So now we're just wiping the excess wax off. And what'll happen the first sunny day that this Gallows sees, this will soften back up and soak deeper into the leather. And there we go. I think I can safely say that this is quite the contrast. I'm pretty satisfied. So that is it for the Boom Gallows project. Things I could have done better is a new piece of wood. That crutch is 2 inches thick, so it's not readily available. It's kind of expensive. It wasn't a strength issue because the wood piece sits on top of stainless steel tubing, so not a big deal. I cut the leather pieces large enough to cover all the old nail holes, which was probably 3 generations of that. They were partially filled with epoxy and had 5, 6, 7, 8 coats of varnish, so not a strength issue. I just wanted to salvage the old stuff and keep it going. So I'm pleased with how it came out. Could have been better, but only so much time. So if you have any comments, put them in the comments below, suggestions and so on, and I'll provide some links in the comments to sites that were influential on this. Thanks.